Okay, so I'm making this video as part of the data science team training for CSTE. And particularly I want to make these videos because our meetings have been a little packed. And so this is an opportunity for me to talk about some of the ideas. And what I want to go through is just a project plan example. So right here we just have a basic spreadsheet, and this relates to the sort of project plan that I would have worked on when I was in the pharmaceutical industry. So we're looking at different processes here. This particular case is something that we would do for a study. And you can look at some of the variables we're recording. So we have our process name, we have our data cut, our patient attrition, different steps like creating a demographics table or creating a comorbidities table. We have start dates, finish dates. We have person. It's important when we record person that we look at not just the name, but also the name and the title. Because a lot of times when we do a project and we're documenting our processes, those might change. And we really want to know, is that associated more with a title role or the individual who did something? We have an estimated number of hours. I always like to put an estimated number of hours in there, but it's usually best to get an estimate from the person who's actually doing the work. A lot of times you'll have an issue where, a manager might tell someone who's going to do the work, hey, that'll be really quick. Well, the person who does the work comes back and says, no, that's going to take a long time. You usually want to go with the estimate of the person who's going to do the work. On the other hand, some tasks are usually very easy for certain people. And so getting an estimated hours is just very important to kind of help timeline things out. Dependencies are a very big thing. So as you do a process, you want to look at how you might have dependencies. And in this particular case, we want to start with our data cut. That's the very first step. We have to go get our data, set it up. Then we have our patient attrition. That's where we want to define populations based off of that from whatever study criteria we have. And then we're doing things like making a demographics table, or given a population, you can make a comorbidities table. Those dependencies are important because as we go to milestone things out, we have to do things in sequential order. Even if somebody says, I just want to know about the comorbidities, that's not going to do you any good until you've looked at your patient attrition, and before that, you've worked at your data cut. So as you work on a project and document things, you do a lot of working backwards. Then, of course, we have the project. So in this particular case, this would be just a broad drug study for a pharmaceutical client. And the last part is that we have our status, just where things are at. This is a pretty good way of just developing some basic documentation looking at a project. You want to look at these different processes. You want to make sure that your start dates and finish dates are appropriate and start working backward. So for example, if you've got a final dashboard that's going to be done in, let's just say September, and you know that it's going to take a programmer, let's give that person a month to get the data, put it to the dashboard. But you realize that the data is going to come from another party. And so you have to give them a month to collect the data. And before that, you want to get a data use agreement signed, which is going to take a month. Well, now you have to be 3 months out to meet that deadline. It's very important to consider how you have prerequisites as you look at a project. Another very important thing to consider is if steps have to be done in parallel or sequentially. If we look at this, we have demographics and comorbidities, and we actually have 2 different programmers who are capable of doing that. On the other hand, neither programmer can do work until the programmer responsible for the patient attrition does it. So understanding that is very handy in terms of trying to break things down, because basically you can take those steps, and as long as they're sequential steps, more effort means you can do things at the same time, or if they can be in parallel. But if they're sequential steps, if you have to have one person do something than another person, adding more people onto a project doesn't necessarily speed things up. So that's a very important breakdown consideration. So hopefully this is a useful guide as you work on your own projects, and feel free to modify this, take what's useful, and if things aren't useful, feel free to just ignore them. Thanks.